Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, talking about first, mobile home park investing, and then investing in parking lot assets. What makes them profitable? What gets investors excited about mobile home parks and parking lots? What are the risks? And what's the future of both of these real estate asset classes? All with a terrific guest today on Get Rich Education. You know, most people think they're playing it safe with their liquid money, but they're actually losing. Savings accounts and bonds don't keep up when true inflation eats 6 or 7% of your wealth every single year. I invest my liquidity with FFI, Freedom Family Investments, in their flagship program. Why? Fixed 10 to 12% returns have been predictable and paid quarterly. There's real-world security backed by needs-based real estate like affordable housing, senior living, and healthcare. Ask about the Freedom Flagship Program when you speak to a Freedom Coach there. And that's just one part of their family of products. They've got workshops, webinars, and seminars designed to educate you before you invest. Start with as little as $25K and finally get your money working as hard as you do. Get started at freedomfamilyinvestments.com/GRE or send a text now. It's 1-937-795-8989. Yep, text their Freedom Coach directly. Again, 1-937-795-8989.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE. From Burlington, Vermont to Burlington, Washington, and across 188 nations worldwide, I'm Keith Weinhold, and you are inside Get Rich Education. We are all firmly in the fall season now, autumn if you prefer, and as we often do, we're discussing residential real estate investing today, but it's two different and distinct niches within that, and I guess they both have to do with wheels, as it turns out. Mobile home parks in the first part of the show, and then parking assets later today. I think there's a compelling future use case for at least one of those two. To speak to our international audience for a moment, but this will actually help clarify things for you if you're a North American too. Though it's called a mobile home, well, it doesn't really have that much to do with wheels. There might not be any wheels on it. And if a resident lives inside one of these for, say, a decade, well, then it's probably going to remain attached to that same location on the ground all 10 years. That's why a mobile home is often referred to now as a manufactured home. What it is it's a factory-built residence constructed on a permanent chassis and then transported to a site. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And they are a less expensive alternative to traditional homes that have, say, a cast-in-place concrete foundation. So therefore, understand mobile homes are affordable housing, highly affordable housing, and that's really important in this housing affordability crisis. And I've talked quite a bit about that on the show and the meager national supply of that. All types of affordable housing, they are recession resilient. I mean, that's just one reason why we love affordable housing types here at GRE, where we're often buying rental property just below an area's median price. You know, people think of mobile home parks, MHPs, that they're all crime-ridden and that there are slumlords, but that is not true in every case. There are actually nice ones. If you're an MHP investor, you often only own the land beneath the structure and not the mobile home itself. The resident owns the mobile home itself. So therefore, if there's a leaky roof or a window needs replacement or flooring needs replacement, that is on the resident to fix, not you. MHP dwellers, they often don't have to pay property tax though, because like I said, they don't own the land. The landlord or the community, therefore, is the one that has to pay the property tax. So there's some thoughts on mobile home parks for you. Parking asset real estate, that's still settling into its post-pandemic pattern with return to office mandates that aren't really fully matured yet. We're still settling in and seeing how that is going to look. And then when it comes to parking lots, you got to wonder about its future when you consider the proliferation of autonomous cars. Will that make parking lots obsolete? I'll have our guest address that. Longtime GRE listeners, you might remember episode 13 of this show. Yeah, almost 11 years ago. That episode was about how autonomous cars will affect your future and your real estate and the very need for parking lots. And a lot of what I discussed there in early 2015, that is beginning to come true. But this autonomous car adoption, that is way slower than a lot of people thought. I mean, most Americans, they still have not been inside an autonomous car at all. A lot of people are still saying that they don't trust that. That should change soon. But as for now, I'm just guessing that fewer than 1 in 10 Americans have been inside an autonomous car, probably quite a bit less than that. Today's terrific guest has over $1 billion in real estate transactions under his belt. This should be interesting. He is a specific investor in both mobile home parks and parking assets. Today's guest is a seasoned real estate investor, entrepreneur, and he's a prominent voice in the space because he hosts the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow show. He's built a strong reputation as an expert in 2 niches that have less competition than some other investments, and we'll discuss those 2 today. They are mobile home parks and also parking asset investments, 2 often overlooked yet pretty profitable niches, and he and I have a lot in common. I'm on the Forbes Real Estate Council. He is on the Forbes Technology Council. He and I are both native Pennsylvanians. It's been quite a few years. Hey, welcome back to GRE. It's Kevin Bupp.
Hey, Keith, thanks for having me back. And yeah, excited to be here, my friend, and excited to finally get caught up. When you referenced that it was nearly 8 years since we last spoke, I was taken back a little bit because a lot's happened in the past 8 years.
I know, that's wild with where things are at. People didn't even know the meaning of the word pandemic when you were last here on the show. Kevin, let's talk about really the case for mobile home parks. I know they can be a strong cash flowing asset once people are really dialed into them. I think what's interesting is since you were last here on the show, really from the pandemic on, it's been a well-documented national story where lay people just know about how the supply of housing just is not adequate in order to meet demand. And what that usually means, just talking about the single family space, is of course they're building, but they're not building fast enough to keep up with population growth and housing demand. But what's so compelling about mobile home parks is, I mean, they're barely even building them anymore. Like they are contracting in supply in a lot of areas. So tell us more about the compelling case for mobile home parks.
Yeah, well, you hit a big one. It's an asset class that has a diminishing supply.
Right.
We can get into the reasons behind that. But, just from a high level perspective, one of the other factors as it relates to, available homes, available housing for the growing population is that while they are building stick-built homes, they're not fulfilling the needs of those that actually need affordable housing. So there's not a lot of the average working household can't necessarily afford the starter home any longer. And so mobile home parks are unique. I truly feel they're the best vehicle to help us fill this void of housing, affordable housing that is really needed throughout the entirety of the country. I mean, there's very few markets in this country that are still affordable. There's some places you can still go buy. You can probably go to Flint, Michigan and buy a home for $50,000 or $60,000. But generally speaking, I think the median home price today, I think it's crested over $400,000. I don't have the exact number, but I do believe it's over $400,000. And the average starter family or even folks that are just working 2 jobs, making $40,000, $50,000 a year, they can't afford to purchase that type of home, a $400,000 home. And so again, these mobile homes, you had mentioned they're not building mobile home parks any longer. However, they're still building new mobile homes. And it's kind of interesting what's evolved over the past 10 years. The quality of the product it's like a night and day difference of what it looked like 10, 15 years ago of the homes themselves to what they look like today and what you get for your money. The average single wide that we might be putting into a community, brand new home, 1,400 square feet, someone could come in and for roughly $80, $70 to $80 a foot can buy a brand new home that's never been lived in before. That's unheard of. That's absolutely unheard of when you compare it to the average or the median home price across the U.S. today. So it really is kind of the last frontier. And it's typically any market that we're in, If you take the same comparable quality of an apartment complex in the same, area of town, the same school districts, we're typically about 20% less all in cost to actually own your own home versus that of even renting the comparable size apartment. So it's a very compelling reason for folks that are looking for an affordable place, but not just affordable, but clean, safe, and quiet. I mean, like, we run very respectable communities. They're in the really good school districts. They're places that folks are proud to live and raise their families in.
Yeah, that's true. This would really help meet that affordability challenge, another problem that's been so well documented. Talk to us more about what makes mobile home park investing different from investing in single family rentals or even a fourplex or a 20-unit apartment building.
A lot of the fundamentals are similar, and I would say that it's probably more comparable to that of an apartment complex to a certain degree. Just think of it as a horizontal apartment complex where units aren't stacked on top of one another; they're just laid out horizontally, more wider than they are tall. But the bigger difference is, in most instances, we don't actually own the homes. So the residents own the mobile homes, whereas we as community owners own the infrastructure. We own the land, we own the roads, we own the sewer lines, the water lines, the common areas, if it has a clubhouse, if it has amenities. So we maintain and we own all that collective area where the folks basically come and they bring their home, they affix it to the ground, and then ultimately pay a slot rent to have their home there on that premise. And so for us, it's very attractive in that if a resident that's in their home, if they have a roofing leak, if they have a plumbing leak, they have their HVAC system go out, they're not calling us like they
That's
might
on
if
them.
you were a
Yeah.
renter in an apartment complex. It's on them. Yeah. So they're homeowners. And a couple other really attractive elements of that come as a result of having residents that live there, not just renters, is that they're very sticky. And so just like in a standard single family subdivision where you've got folks that might have lived there for generations, you just referenced that your parents literally lived in the same house. And so they've lived there a very long time. It is quite common to find residents and even multi-generations of the same family that live in our communities. And a couple come to mind. We just celebrated a woman's 50th year of living in one of our communities in Maryland. And so you've got sticky resident base. There's not a lot of turnover. And then the last big piece of it that is really attractive to us is a homeowner mentality is very different than a renter mentality as far as upkeep. And so you got folks that they plant flowers, they ensure that their units have curb appeal, right? They put flags out, they put decorations out during the holidays. It's a lot more warmth than that of what you might find in a traditional rental apartment complex.
So what all does the tenant pay for? You mentioned that they pay for the lot rent. What other expenses do they have? How does that look for them?
Typically, utilities. So they'll have their own individual meter. They'll pay, direct to the utility company, utility provider, water and sewer as well. They'll pay for their water and sewer usage, and that can come in many different forms. Sometimes our communities have public utilities where it's billed directly by the utility provider. Sometimes it's more of a private system where we're actually acting and participating as a utility provider and then billing them back for their usage. Really the standard things that you might pay for if you live in a single family home. I think some of the areas where it might differ, and honestly, this is really community by community for us. Some of our communities, literally the residents, they pay for the utility use, but outside of that, literally we mow the grass, we shovel their driveway, we shovel their walkways. We handle all those type of elements. Whereas some other communities, the residents, we might require that they actually maintain their own grass. So they have to mow it or hire a third-party vendor to come in and mow it. They might have to actually shovel their own driveway. And a lot of how we run a community really is depend on how it used to be run when we took it over. If it's not broke, we don't fix it. And so a lot of times we don't like shaking things up too much. If they're used to a certain way, we just keep it status quo and continue rolling on of how the prior ownership used to manage it. Really similar elements of what an individual living in a single-family home might pay for. So very similar.
Okay, so they pay you the rent for the lot. This puts nearly all the maintenance and repair burden on them. So is there any sort of HOA-like body here?
Not in our communities. You do find some communities, and most of the communities that have an HOA are typically a community that's gone through more of a co-op type arrangement to where the actual individuals own a fractionalized share of the community, the residents that live there. And so then they have the oversight from an HOA that's managing the day-to-day operations, managing the financing, managing the budget, things like that. But in our communities, no, there is not an HOA. I'd say the one other thing that's typically included in lot rent is they don't have property taxes, right? So we own the land. And so the individuals that live in these units aren't paying individual property taxes. A lot of states require that they have a registration fee, just like you do in your vehicle, that they would have to pay on an annual basis. And then most of them have insurance as well. You're carrying homeowners insurance on the actual dwelling itself. Outside of that, it's, again, just pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so here we are in this low competition, low supply niche that we're talking about here. We think about communities and NIMBYism in building, not in my backyardism, oftentimes that's a sentiment that residents of a certain area have. Residents say something like, we don't want this new 200-unit apartment building or mobile home park here in our single-family home neighborhood. Like, that's NIMBYism. But in mobile home parks, to me, it seems like NIMBYism is often at a different level. It's at the government or the municipal level. Like, your town or city might not want one because it doesn't generate as much property tax revenue as a new single-family neighborhood would. Is that the reality, Kevin?
That's absolutely the reality. And that's why you don't see new parks getting built. I think last year, ones that I know of, there were about a dozen that were built. Many more than that, they're actually shut down, for redevelopment purposes. And so that is absolutely a huge part of it. In fact, it's frustrating because pretty much every municipality across the country, the topic of affordable housing, it's on the radar. And it's probably one that is discussed quite often. And in all reality, again, these mobile home parks really would help resolve that challenge at most of these, municipalities, the shortage of homes, affordable homes that they're faced across the country. And so, another big piece of it, you mentioned the tax basis. Absolutely. The municipality they'd have much better tax revenue from pretty much anything else that could be built there. And so that's a big barrier. But the NIMBYism piece of it, I think a big part of that is it's unfortunate. And I think it's getting better over time. There's bad operators in our space, just like there are bad operators in the apartment space, just like there's bad operators, landlords that have single family homes that just let them deteriorate over time and don't repair things. Unfortunately, we kind of get lumped. All the mobile home parks get lumped in that bad bucket. And so while there's, I always joke and say there's mobile home parks that are on the wrong side of town, wrong side of the tracks, right? You don't want to go to during the daytime. Well, guess what? There's subdivisions, the single family home neighborhoods that are the same thing. And there's apartments that are like that as well. You don't go anywhere near them. And you've got the middle of the road, right? You've got just the good, hardworking, blue-collar folks that want to send their kids to good public schools. We've got those communities. Apartments are that way too, single-family home subdivision. And you got white-collar stuff. You got some higher-end stuff. Unfortunately, we kind of all get lumped in that bad bucket. That's where the assumption that's made by folks that don't understand mobile home communities, that have never driven through one. They just assume that it's all, basically drug, sex, rock and roll, the wrong element that we do not want in our neighborhood. We don't want anywhere near us. It's going to devalue our home prices. And for that reason, you just don't see them getting built. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the mobile home park that I drive past most often. It's sort of walled off. There's maybe an 8 or 10 foot high wall around it. I don't know if that's something that the municipality erected to sort of screen its appearance off, or something that the mobile home park built, which is my guess as to who built it. But not all mobile home parks look blighted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know the case that you just referenced there. I mean, it could be for sound deadening purposes. If it's off of a busy road, it could have been something put up as far as just to kind of shield off so folks that are driving past don't see the community. My guess would be that's probably not the reason it was built. But in any event, we've got a number of communities, Keith, that if you drove through, and if I blindfolded you and you drove in, so you went past the entrance, you went past a sign that said manufactured home community, and I took you down a road, you wouldn't believe that you're actually in a mobile home park. Some of these homes, they're double wide homes and they look like ranch homes. And so they're actually laid out perpendicular or parallel to the street. And then they have 2-car site built garages that are attached to them via breezeway. And so they look like your traditional ranch style home, but they're absolutely 100% mobile homes that could be moved if you wanted to move them. And for a fraction of the price of what a neighboring single family home might sell for. So, there's all different qualities. They all come in different shapes and sizes. But to my point earlier, some of these communities, they're not even affordable. There's down here in Florida, we've got what we call lifestyle communities. It's very common out in Arizona as well, where it's a lot of times a second home for snowbirds, retirees that want to come down, they want to live an active lifestyle. They want to have 2 swimming pools. They want to have an activities director. They want to have, shuffleboard and pickleball courts and tennis courts, and they want to live this lifestyle. And those units are anything but affordable. In fact, there's a community down the road from me that, their lot rent is $1,200 a month. And so you factor that in with probably a house payment, and, you might be looking at $2,000 to, $2,300 a month all in for the house and the lot rent. And so not necessarily in the affordable scheme of things, but they come in all shapes and sizes. And again, unfortunately, we just get lumped into that bad bucket. And it's unfortunate because I do think that we could really help start making a dent in this affordable housing crisis. I don't know how it's going to happen any other way. I really don't, because we can't build affordable products at this point in time. It's just not possible.
A posh and exclusive mobile home park there that you're referencing in Florida. As paradoxical as that sounds, tell us, Kevin, how that really works, because I know you help investors get into mobile home parks. Does this mean, an investor owns a full park, or I wouldn't imagine you're just doing it at the level where you just own one lot and then have one dweller pay you the lot rent? So tell us about how it works from the investor angle.
We have fund structures that we typically roll out through Sunrise Capital Investors, and any one individual fund will own somewhere between 9 to 13, somewhere typically in that range, mobile home communities. These communities can range in size from maybe as small as 80 or 90 lots to the largest community we own at present time is 780 lots, and so it's quite large. I mean, it's the size of a small town.
Yeah.
But essentially, investors come in and they own based on their investment, they own a proportionate share of the various properties that are owned underneath that fund umbrella. And so, an individual might come with $100,000 and own a smaller proportionate share than someone that comes in with $1 million. But they are owners; they're absolute owners. They participate in the cash flow, they participate in the upside, and they participate in the proceeds when we have capital events, either cash out refinances or potential sale events.
Tell us more about why it's so profitable. Why do mobile home park investors get excited?
As with anything, Keith, you got to buy it right. And, we look at a lot of deals and a lot of deals don't pencil. Like if we bought it for what they're asking, we wouldn't make money. We might lose money. And so the money's made on the buy, just like with any other type of real estate investment. But I think the one factor that really has allowed mobile home parks to be an attractive investment vehicle over the last decade, it's grown the attention of lots of different private equity groups, institutional investors that 15 years ago, they weren't in the space. And the biggest reason is a lot of these, it's a very fragmented niche. And so there was no consolidation that existed 10 years ago. There was really only 2 publicly traded companies. Outside of that, it was mom and pops that typically owned 1, maybe sometimes 2 or 3 communities, but it was just a very fragmented niche. And what you find in those fragmented niches that there's a lot of inefficiencies that exist in the operations. There's a lot of inefficiencies that exist with regards to utility management or managerial oversight, within the community, or even keeping up with market rents. And so very often we'll get into a community. We just bought one at the end of last year and right outside of Ann Arbor, great submarket in Michigan. It literally has never traded hands. It was built back in the 80s by the gentleman we purchased it from. He was a subdivision developer, but he got into the manufactured housing space. So he built this, what looked like a subdivision, but it was mobile homes. And he basically owned it up until we acquired it last year. But gorgeous community, well-maintained. Needed some upgrades, different amenities that just were a little worn out and tired. But the biggest element within that community was that the market rents in the local area were roughly $800 a month. $800 a month for lot rent. And when we purchased it from him, the average lot rent throughout the community was $477. So there was a significant loss to lease that exists. And we see this quite often with just over time. They've owned it free and clear. They go 5, 6, 7 years without doing rent increases. And sooner or later, they find themselves in a situation where they are severely below the local market rents. And so there's typically a lot of loss to lease recapture that we find going into these communities. Sometimes we'll also go in and we'll find there's a lot of waste with the water and sewer cost. It might not be billed back for usage to the residents, to where if you're not paying for something, sometimes you're abusing it. And a lot of times we can go in and put individual meters in and almost send entirely that savings down to the bottom line and find it as additional NOI on our P&L. And so it's just inefficiency of operations. And again, quite common given the mom and pop nature of this asset class. But it's very quickly becoming consolidated now. It looks very different today than what it looked like as far as the ownership groups. When I go to an industry event 10 years ago, those other guys like us, and then a lot of mom and pops. Now it's, the likes of reps from Blackstone and Carlyle Group and lots of other institutional groups that are showing up there. So just it's a very different world, and probably more akin to that of what the apartment sector looks like as far as ownership groups and the consolidation that's happening.
You're feeling more of that competition. Kevin and I are going to come back and talk about another, I suppose, real estate investment that has something to do with wheels, and that is investing in parking lots. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. If you're scrolling for quality real estate and finance info today, yeah, it can be a mess. You hit paywalls, pop-ups, push alerts, cookie banners. It's like the internet is playing defense against you. Not so fun. That's why it matters to get clean, free content that actually adds no hype value to your life. This is the golden age of quality email newsletters, and I write every word of ours myself. It's got a dash of humor, it's direct, and it gets to the point because even the word abbreviation is too long. My letter takes less than 3 minutes to read, and it leaves you feeling sharp and in the know about real estate investing. This is paradigm-shifting material. And when you start the letter, you'll also get my 1-hour fast real estate video course completely free as well. It's called the Don't Quit Your Daydream letter. It wires your mind for wealth, and it couldn't be simpler to get. Visit greletter.com. While it's fresh in your head, take a moment to do it now at greletter.com. Visit greletter.com. The same place where I get my own mortgage loans is where you can get yours, Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They provided our listeners with more loans than anyone because they specialize in income properties. They help you build a long-term plan for growing your real estate empire with leverage. Start your pre-qual and even chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. While it's on your mind, start at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's ridgelendinggroup.com.
Hey, it's Corporate Direct's Ted Sutton. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking about 2 real estate investment niches with Kevin Bupp today, an expert in both mobile home park investing and in parking lot assets. And Kevin, I got to tell you, I am more skeptical about parking lot investing than I am about mobile home park investing, but you can probably help me with this. I think we know that, just historically, ever since Henry Ford did his thing, mass transit adoption is really slow in most U.S. cities. But anymore, one needs to wonder, okay, can autonomous cars disrupt the parking model? A robo-taxi can just constantly stay on the road, dropping off and picking up passengers where, some people foresee a day in the not too distant future that people won't even need to own cars. They'll sort of have a subscription to a car service. But now this is where your expertise is, so I'm sure you've thought above and beyond that. So what are your thoughts there just for the need for parking spaces?
You make a valid point. I think the adoption of that, I think it will be very different from market to market, city to city. Whereas if you want to maybe look at one area, we have a parking garage today in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix is very much a driving city. It's parsed out very far. The public transit, it's not great there. And again, it's a widespread city. Whereas if you compare it to like a San Francisco, the adoption of robo vehicles and robo taxis and things like that, autonomous vehicles, is much faster than that of a Phoenix. But also, San Francisco is a much more consolidated marketplace as far as the urban core. And so for that reason, when we look at parking, there's a couple things also that feed into that. So I'm going to back up a little bit. One of the major changes that has been really playing out over the past 15 years within the parking sector is that building departments within, now I think it's over 100 cities across the country. Denver just announced last week that they're also adopting this policy. And that policy is that historically, if you were, Keith, you're going to go and, hey, I want to build this in downtown, I want to go build this apartment complex, condo complex, mixed use property, whatever it might be. Historically, they would have required you, whether you wanted to or not, they would have made you put in a certain amount of parking per 1,000 square feet. Every municipality would have a formula. And what a lot of these cities realized a couple decades ago is that based on their, antiquated formulas, they had a surplus of parking available on a lot of these downtown areas. It wasn't being used. And giving the developer an opportunity and the choice to say, hey, do I want to build 20 more parking spaces that aren't going to get used, or I want to build 10 more apartment units? They're going to choose the apartment units. And so the parking minimum requirements have been taken away, have been eliminated in a lot of cities over the last decade plus. And so that's created a shrinking supply of parking. Because now when developers build something, they're building only as much as they need, sometimes not even as much as they really need, because then they can still rely upon other ancillary parking structures within the immediate marketplace. And so there's a shrinking supply of parking. And in every city that we own in today, there's a massive shrinking supply of parking. So that's a big piece of it, that we know that inevitably, if we get the location right, an area where literally you wouldn't be able to afford, based on the cost of construction and the cost of land, you wouldn't be able to afford even building new parking structure if you so chose to. And now that there's also a shrinking supply, diminishing supply of this parking, that we can be comfortable in our demand for our product. And so to the point of like autonomous vehicles and things of that nature, I do think there will be a time I don't know how long that time is. I do think that there will be a time where we'll see some sort of impact. I don't know what that is. And so how we underwrite deals is we feel very confident over the next 10 years. We have to have an absolute confidence level over the next 10 years that there's going to be continual demand based on the various factors within this marketplace, the demand drivers that are servicing that garage, like who's parking there, why they're parking there. But second to that, when we buy something, we need to have the air rights. We know that there inevitably will be a higher and better use. So location, location, location. It's got to make sense today as parking. The underwriting has to stand on its own as parking, and we have to have a comfort level that 10 years, there will be sufficient demand throughout the duration of the next decade. In the event things start changing down the road, we know that literally the lowest use that it could ever have is its present use, which is parking, because it's just a concrete structure. Sometimes just an asphalt parking lot to where once you go vertical, that's where you're going to be able to unlock a lot of additional potential. And so we don't underwrite the future. We look at that as icing on the cake, but we know based on the location, the proximity to, what else is happening in that marketplace, that location will be in demand, not just today, but many decades to come. So I'll stop there and see if you have any clarifying questions.
I think about how for the parking lot investor, Jamie Dimon has been really good for you. He is so hard on the return to office mandate.
Yeah. I'd say one thing that's important to make note is I don't know what the future holds for office. I tend to make the argument that pick an office building in a marketplace, wherever they're at with the occupancy today, I think it's probably as good as it's going to get. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but I feel like it's been long enough since COVID. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be a few companies that are going to be pressing, in a big way to get people back. But I think 80% of them that we're going to go back are already there. And so any parking asset that we look at, if it's got more than 10 or 15% as far as relationship with an office building or multiple office buildings in the immediate vicinity, then we typically pass on it. And on top of that, it's got to have a variety of demand drivers. So it just can't be supportive of one or two different demand drivers. We have to have at least five. And so it can be a courthouse, municipal buildings, sports arenas. It's got to be a 24/7 city where there's something happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Hotel valet, restaurants, retail, things like that. And office has to be a very minimal part of that makeup, or else we just move on. Because I don't know how to fix that problem yet. I don't know what the future holds for your traditional office towers, especially the ones that are 50, 60% vacant at the present time.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you look at a parking lot and you're evaluating its potential and its current use, you're basically thinking about what is that tenant mix. You don't want 100% of it to be for one office building. You would probably want a number of uses.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. Again, like I said, 5 is our minimum. I mean, the more the merrier. And I'd say another big piece of it, if we had to look at the different demand drivers and put a value or a hierarchy of what we feel, what are the highest priority demand drivers, transient is the best. I want to know that the folks that are coming there's enough attractions in the immediate vicinity, and we need to know what those attractions are and better understand those attractions. But there's a variety of attractions in the immediate vicinity to where it's going to continually attract transient parkers. So it's not a reliance upon one thing. And so, for example, we just closed on a garage in historic Philadelphia. And so it's a block away from Liberty Bell, 2 blocks from Independence Hall, a litany of other museums. I mean, like it is, when we talk about location, it's there. That part of Philadelphia has been in demand by tourism for hundreds of years. And I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. And so 70% of the makeup of the traffic in that garage is made up of transient traffic. So folks that are visiting the various attractions in the immediate vicinity. So even if one of those attractions went away, which most of them are historic, they're not going to go away, but even if one or two did, it still wouldn't have that significant of an impact on the parking demand.
That's interesting. Okay, a transient customer, not one that's showing up and parking there every day to go to work. And yes, the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, there's going to be a long-term demand to see those sorts of things in person. So that's an interesting way to think about that. And Kevin, while we've been talking about parking, at least in my mind's eye, a lot of times I've just been thinking about one paved at-grade parking area, but we're talking about parking garages as well. Or what are some of the trade-offs there between parking garages and an at-grade parking lot?
Yeah, I mean, at-grade parking lot can't get any simpler than that. I mean, typically they're asphalt or sometimes just crushed gravel, but that's it. So as far as future CapEx requirements, there's not many, right? It's very, very minimal. Whereas a parking garage, especially if it's in a colder environment where there's snow and you've got salt on the road, salt that's making its way up the concrete, seeping into the cracks. You've got structural rebar issues to worry about, things of that nature. So weather can take a major toll on parking structures if they're not maintained well. Whereas, the worst that could happen, the same weather, the weather takes the same toll on these asphalt parking lots, but it really only equates to maybe a pothole that you have to fill in. And a parking structure could be deteriorated to the point of no return if it's been neglected long enough to where it might be unsafe structurally, where, now you're getting condemned or shut down. So big considerations there. It's interesting. The one we own in Phoenix. The Phoenix, it's a desert. It's a desert climate. They get very little moisture, and that parking garage was built in the 60s, so a very long time ago. It's the oldest thing we have in our portfolio, but it better condition has been preserved better than that of a recent garage we purchased that was built in 1990. That's all the environment that it's in. There's really not much that can deteriorate concrete when it's in the desert.
Was there any last thing on parking lot investing, like something that gets an investor really interested in this asset class? What's really compelling and profitable about it?
It's a very technology-driven business, and what we have found is a lot of these parking assets have either they're owned by, an individual investor, or if they happen to be owned by an institution, they've never been viewed as the primary investment vehicle. A lot of institutions that own parking garages, they happen to own them by default because maybe they bought the 2 office towers years back and it just happened to come with parking.
Right.
And so a lot of times they've been somewhat neglected. Like the P&L has been neglected. They haven't found ways to really extract all the value out of these parking facilities. And so very commonly we'll go in and we'll find that the technology that's in place is 10 years old. And think about what a computer 10 years ago looked like, right? Like you're not catching all the license plates. You're not able to log in and adjust pricing in a dynamic manner based on supply demand factors. And so we can simply go in and just create a more efficient pricing model and find sometimes, 10, 15% of additional revenue just from doing those simple things, like literally a few $100,000 worth of upgrades in technology. We can add millions of dollars of value. There's other factors, just simple things. Folks want to park in a not just clean and safe, but well lit. They want to feel safe in lighting. And we'll find parking facilities that still have old halogen lights. Half of them are burnt out. If you start surveying people, they're actually not parking there in the evenings. They're finding somewhere else to go because they don't feel safe. And so just going in and doing a revamp, an upfit with LED lights, making it nice and bright and clean, and letting everyone feel safe, we'll find an instant increase in demand in parkers in the later evening hours. So, just little simple operational tweaks that we can make that just have simply been overlooked for many, many years by the prior ownership groups.
That's really interesting that oftentimes the owner of a parking lot owns that parking lot as an afterthought because they were in it to purchase the building that accompanies the parking lot. So it would make sense that when you focus on that parking lot, you could really add value and profitability to that lot. Well, Kevin, these have been interesting chats between mobile home park investing and parking lot assets. I think that the commonality here is that you, the investor, are just owning a lot, and therefore the maintenance and hassles with these things are really low. This gives our audience an awful lot to think about. So, Kevin, are there any last thoughts that you have about this space overall? And then please let us know how our audience can learn more.
No additional thoughts, I don't believe. I'd say that if you have an interest, if we've piqued your interest at all, we've written a number of white papers on both asset classes, both parking as well as mobile home parks. You can download all that for free on our website, investwithsunrise.com. We've got a number of other case studies on our website. We're pretty transparent about what we buy, what we've owned, what we've exited out of. We'll go as far as providing appraisal reports and third parties and things like that on our website. So if you just want to get a sense of not just who we are, what we do, but just have a better understanding of the investment thesis behind parking and manufactured housing, there's tons of resources that you can download from the website.
Well, that's a great way to learn more about Kevin, what he does, and then maybe even invest alongside him. Well, Kevin, it's been valuable and eye-opening. It's been great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Keith. It's been a lot of fun, my friend. Good seeing you again.
Yeah, good stuff from Kevin there. The MHP space becoming more consolidated and corporatized too. Single-family rentals are different from mobile home parks in that way. 90% of single-family rentals are owned by small mom and pops, which means those people that own between just 1 and 5 properties. Kevin used the term loss to lease a few times. That phrase, loss to lease, being a real estate education show, what that term means is really a lot like how it sounds. It is the potential income that a property owner misses out on because the actual rent collected is less than the current market rent. That's what loss to lease means. Though I like the long-term future of mobile home parks more than parking deals, Kevin did, though, have some great answers for why he still likes parking. He focuses on a 10-year horizon. He looks for at least 5 use types for the parking. And then another great point is that in a lot of cases, the land that the parking occupies is its lowest use. So therefore, when they sell the parking area, they can get some nice exit income. That makes a lot of sense. And being two native Pennsylvanians like we are, I am familiar with that part of Philly that he's talking about. In fact, what's funny is that in producing this show today, I guess cookies are doing their thing. This parking lot deal in Philly just appeared in my Instagram feed. Next week on the show, it'll be back to no guest. It's going to be all me, and you're going to hear some things that you wouldn't expect to hear. Until then, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.